stand in thy sight. All evildoers thou dost hate, cut off shall liars be. The bloody and deceitful man abhorred is by thee. But I unto thy house will come in thy abundant grace, and I will worship in thy fear toward thy holy place, because of watchful enemies. Oh, lead me by thy grace, and in thy righteousness thy way make straight before my face. Let all who trust in thee be glad, in shouts their praise proclaim. Thou savest them, let all rejoice who love thy holy name. For unto the righteous man thou wilt thy blessings yield. With favor thou wilt compass him about as with a shield.
And now, Brother Jackson, with the book of Romans.
Good morning, brethren. Good day, brethren. Happy Sabbath to everyone, and a happy second month of the season of Aviv to everyone, according to the calendar as we understand it. So today we're going to continue with the book of Romans. We will be going into Romans chapter 3. But before we do that, I wanted to just say a little bit about the month for today. We're just going to bring a copy of the month on the screen so you can see it. Hold on a second. Thank you. Yes. So again, thank you for your patience, and happy Sabbath and happy second month of the spring of the Aviv season. Today we're going to we will continue, as I was saying, with the book of Romans. Very interesting and helpful, and a really packed information. Don't know if we'll cover it all today, but we'll do a quick review of the second month before that. Okay, it'll be quick. So if hopefully you can see the screen, we have the second month on the screen, but let's go up and look at the first month for a little bit. So we started the first month, looking at the wrong year in my end. Let me turn to the right year, 2024. Right, yes. So we started our new year on the 20th. See where the mouse is moving? That was the 20th. And then 2 weeks later, we started on the 14th. Oh, and I said the 20th. Yes, I'm looking at the 20th of March. My apologies. That was the 20th of March, which is where you see the number 1 up there. That will be the 20th of March. And then we started our Passover on the 14th, right? We all did that. And then it ended on the 21st. You can see where the mouse is wiggling. 21st, you can see where the mouse is wiggling. You can see where the mouse is wiggling. And then we have the 26th over here where the mouse is wiggling. Now, the square here around it represents, actually, as I've mentioned to some of you, that this is actually where Messiah was crucified. As we pointed out, he was arrested the night of the 13th, No, I'm sorry, the ninth of, is that correct? No, the night of the 14th, which was on the third day of the week. You could see that up here being the third day and the green. So the 14th, he ate the Passover as Matthew, Mark, and Luke clearly stated. And then he was arrested that night. Then by the next day, the 15th, you could see that there. And we know throughout the night, the trial, the priests had him, and they were going over, what to do with him. They wanted him dead, and by morning of the 15th, they decided that they all had enough consensus that they would put him to death. So it was morning, as I said, very early in the morning. They took him to Pilate, and Pilate's, didn't want to execute him, they sent him to Herod. Herod didn't want to execute him, sent him back to Herod. Pilate said no fault. So again, there was a lot to happen on the 15th. What's the issue? Is not enough time, because Mark tells us that he was crucified at the third hour, which is 9 a.m. in the morning. 9 a.m. in the morning on 15th, right? It was 9 a.m. in the morning. He would have been crucified, but the trial started, in the early in the morning after sunrise, and there was a lot to happen. And we know he could not, all those events could not have been done in just 3 hours time. Remember, from early morning sunrise to 9 a.m. is just 3 hours. If you look at the accounts of Yeshua's trial, there was a lot of there was going back and forth. So that alone should have been a red flag to us when we hear people say, oh, he was crucified on the 14th or the 15th. That should be a red flag to us that did not happen. Yeshua was not crucified on the 14th because he ate the Passover. He was not crucified on the 15th because his trial started sometime in the morning, and he was crucified by 9 a.m. And there were lots of events to occur, and those events could not have been done really within just 3 hours. It just didn't happen. That's one. But also the fact that, as I've mentioned before, that John chapter 19, verse 16, it tells us that Yeshua's trial ended around 12 noon. That's when Pilate sat on the judgment seat at the 6th hour or 12 noon. You could look at just about any translation. It will either tell you 12 noon or the 6th hour. The 6th hour is the script biblical way of accounting time. Our equivalent time would be around 12 in the afternoon, right? So that's when he was condemned. How could he be condemned? Why is he alive at 12 noon, but then another book tells us he was crucified at 9 a.m.? Simple. It's because he was not crucified on the same day, as again, the very accounts make it plain. You cannot have, there would not be enough time between 6 a.m. in the morning and 9 a.m. in the morning for him to be crucified. It's just not enough time. But clearly through the scriptures, we're told he was condemned at 12 noon on one of these days. We don't know which day he was condemned, but it was at 12 noon he was condemned to be crucified by Pilate. He gave in, and then 9 a.m. on some other day, we don't know what other day it's not specified what other day he was crucified on, but it wasn't on the 14th. Was it on the 15th? But we can find out what day it was by simple inferencing and deduction, because we're told something specific. We know he ate the Passover. We know sometimes later he was condemned and crucified, and we also know for sure that he was risen by the first day of the week, and you could see the 26th. So if he was not crucified by Wednesday on the first week, it could be none of the days within the first week. Try to understand that. But we know that did not happen. Because if he was not crucified on the 15th, there's not enough time between Thursday, Friday, and Sabbath to have 3 days and 3 nights, because he said 3 days and 3 nights, right? So you wouldn't have enough time for that. But then, so the only option, the deduction, is that he was crucified after sometime the second week. I believe it was on the 22nd, after the Passover season, because that's exactly what the priests who wanted him dead wanted. They didn't want him to be crucified during the feast. And if you look at the 22nd, exactly 3 days and 3 nights, you will have he would have been risen as the first fruits on Yom HaBikurim. And that's why the true calendar system has and long before Yeshua came, we had this calendar system that showed Yom HaBikurim is on the 26th, not on the 19th, as tradition would have it if we use traditional ideas on this calendar. But truly, rabbinically speaking, they observed Yom HaBikurim on the 16th. Okay, on the 16th. So watch and see. I believe Monday night will be this year the traditional Passover. You will see the next day will be first fruits for them. So keep that in mind. But so you could see that on the calendar. Again, it's impossible. The Bible tells us Yeshua ate the Passover on the 14th. We have three precise testimonies that are very clear about it. They prepared and ate the Passover. He was arrested that night. John alludes to it. And there was not enough time on the 15th for a 9 a.m. crucifixion because of the length of the trial. You cannot do all those things in just 3 hours. And again, John tells us he was condemned at 12 noon, but was crucified on 9 a.m. So that tells us the crucifixion did not happen on the same day. And since it did not happen on the same day, it could not be any of the times within that first week, because you need 3 full days and 3 full nights. That's what you showed, 3 days and 3 nights. As Jonah was in the heart of the whale, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. So the only way you'll get the 3 full days is if you understand he's as the unleavened bread for these 7 days. He was suffering. He was incarcerated. He was being mistreated. He didn't eat. And this is why on the cross it says, and David says, I count all my bones, because he had lost a lot of weight. And this is why, if you've noticed, even some of the images of Messiah, traditional images on the cross, they show an emaciated person, because that's an ancient understanding of what happened to Messiah, especially according to Psalms 22. He would have been emaciated by the time he's on the cross. He lost a lot of weight from the suffering, from the 7 days, and his body is, broken for us, emaciated. And the psalmist says, and they pierced my hand, they pierced my feet. I can count all my bones, showing that his condition deteriorated physically. And so that's because all these days he was in prison, according to the account in Isaiah, I believe, chapter 56, about the suffering servant in Isaiah. So he was in prison, and that's why they needed the guards to keep watch on him until the day he would be crucified. On that following Wednesday, 3 days and 3 nights, rise from the grave as first fruits. All right, so let's scroll down to the second month. So in the second month, we see, so this was yesterday, right? And this is today. I'm sorry, this was yesterday, which says the first, and today's the 7th day. So today is so in the second month, the first Sabbath to occur on the second month is the first of 7 Sabbaths, leading to Shavuot, leading to the Feast of Weeks, leading to the Feast of Sabbath, leading to Pentecost. So this is one Sabbath one of 7 Sabbaths that you shall count. And as our sister Maxine did mention, in between the days, in between the 7 Sabbaths, we need to be mindful of ourselves. It's very good that she made that point. We need to be mindful of ourselves, make sure we're bearing fruit. Just as in the ancient time, you would count the omer, preparing the omer for unto that 50th day. Here, we're making sure we're purifying ourselves. And it's not a purifying where we purify ourselves and get worse and do the same thing next year. No, it's sanctification. We're getting better and better. We're bearing good fruit. And as our Elohim did, day 1, he did good. Day 2, good. 3, 4, all the way to the 6th day, good. And by the 7th day, all was done. All was very good. So all is setting the example for us that every day we must do what? Good. We must do good. Not just not sin, but we must do good. That's the big difference between old and new covenant requirements. We're not in the new covenant, in the old required covenant, as long as we did not break one of those laws, sin, so to say, we're okay. And if we did sin, as long as it wasn't a sin unto death, you had sacrifices by which you could be forgiven. But in the new covenant, sin is out of the picture. It's not a matter of not sinning. It goes beyond that. It's we decide we're not going to sin. We get baptized because we've repented. We believe in the good news. We get baptized and we keep our baptism pure and pure and pure and pure. So that's called sanctification. So we're sanctifying ourselves daily. And this happens with a relationship with our Elohim. If we don't know him and all we're doing is looking at text, we will not be able to do it. It's his fellowship. It's the joy he gives. It's his presence. It's knowing that he really is. That's part of what drives us to sanctify ourselves. We want to be pleasing to him. We're not just reading words and following just empty words or just the letter of something. We actually are dealing with him directly through Messiah. And we have this sense of growing in his knowledge. All right, so that's what's going on here with the 2nd month. And so today is the first of 7 Sabbaths, counting down to Pentecost. Okay, so when we look at let's see here, and you can see the second Passover will be on the 14th. And it's noticed the second Passover is not on the 3rd day of the week, which to me is helping me think a lot about the requirements of the calendar, biblically speaking, not sectarians. Sectarians say certain things must be, but when I see this, I'm saying the Passover here is allowed. It's on the 14th. It's the date that seems to be important, but when the day here, it's not. It's on the 4th. It's on a Thursday, right? That's when the second Passover will be. So we will look more into some more details, maybe next Sabbath about the second month, look at some things that happen. But that's what I wanted to share with you, and to keep in mind that today is the first of 7 Sabbaths leading to Pentecost. Okay, so with that said, let's go to the book of Romans. So today in the book of Romans, we're going through chapter 3. In chapter 1, Elohim showed us clearly through his servant Paul how no one has any excuse, like the general person has no excuse for sinning, and how they took the truth and mismanaged the truth. They did not follow the truth, and so they made images of the true Elohim, which they shouldn't have been. It's so important for you to understand that, because there are some attacks against the biblical faith that once we understand that, we will easily be able to refute their arguments, because they're trying to say, oh, the Elohim of the Yehudim is nothing but an idol, and here's the idol, and he is, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the son of El, things like that they're saying. But the point is, they're trying to dismiss it as nothing but just mythology. You understand, because of the image, and that's what Satan wants to happen. That's why Satan has people creating these images, so, and pictures of things, so people, the intellectuals, can look at these things. This is nothing but myth. You understand, and this is why it's so bad for people to make drawings of any kind, images of any kind of the divine. We should not do that, because the adversary will use those images to discredit the faith and to blaspheme Elohim himself. So Paul said there's no excuse for that, and he shows how through their mishandling of knowledge, their understanding deteriorated, and Elohim gave them over to a reprobate mind to do things that are harmful. So this, the general people. Then he talks about those who would sit in judgment, those who would be teachers of the blind, of babes, so to say, right? He said, you have no excuse if you are telling people you shouldn't do this or you should do that, and you yourself are doing it or not doing what you should be doing. He says there's no excuse for that. Then he says that all are guilty, basically. Those who claim to have the law but do not obey the law are guilty, and those who don't have the law yet do the things contained in the law are justified, or among themselves, or excusing them, or else being excused in the very day of judgment, as we see in verse 15 and 16 of chapter 2. So Elohim's judgment is perfect, while the judgment of man is not, as we see in verse 1 and 2 of Romans chapter 2. So that's what we've covered so far. Of course, there's a lot of details in that, but that's the overall picture, what's being shown there. Chapter 1, man has no excuse for not believing in Elohim, and they're given over because they don't like the truth. They don't like to retain the knowledge of Elohim. They're given over to a reprobate mind. And then chapter 2, those who would teach should not teach in effect if they haven't, if they're not doing what they're teaching. If they say don't do, they shouldn't do. If they say we should do, they should be doing. So that's the point there. Then now and then especially we saw it, like in verse 29 of chapter 2 to verse 28 and 29 of chapter 2, that the true praisers of Elohim, the true acknowledgers of Elohim, or the Yehudim, are those who are not just of the flesh, but outwardly, but those who are inwardly, not dismissing the physical, but it's just that without the inward person, if a person's circumcised, means nothing. There's no righteousness automatically on a person just because they have circumcision. There are many Gentile nations which were circumcised and they did abominable things, right? So that's what Paul is saying, that this being circumcised doesn't make you righteous. It has to be from the inside, because Abraham was deemed righteous before he was circumcised. It became a sign because he was righteous. It's not the other way around, because I'm circumcised, and so therefore no, not if you're sinning. And there were many circumcised people that perish. Again, through Moses, the account of the 40 years, we know there were, like I said, I keep saying this, visualize it. Millions of people, millions of circumcised men. Not one entered the promised land except for two, Joshua and Caleb. Not one entered. They disqualified themselves. Just think about that. So And that, but he who is a Yehudi, a praiser of Elohim, is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not of the letter. In the spirit, meaning you have that inner drive by the spirit of Elohim. He gives you a free spirit to willingly obey him, and not by the letter. You don't need bit and bridle to tell you, well, you better obey the law or else. That's what that's about all throughout the scriptures. And when we understand that, and we read Paul's other things, teachings in Galatians, then we'll understand what he's saying. The letter, the spirit, then the letter kills. Yes, it does. It doesn't just kill you allegorically. It kills you in the sense that if that's all that's there, when you break it, you're subject to death or whatever punishment that's there. You understand? And if a person persists in sinning, that person will be cut off from Elohim, no matter what sin it is. Even if that sin was not necessarily punishable by death, if a person any high-handed sin, even if it's lying or stealing, which are not necessarily sins unto death, if a person high-handedly lies, high-handedly steals, they're going to be cut off from Israel, that's because it's another sin. It's rebellion. You see, you're breaking the law, but then there's this spirit of rebellion, which is as witchcraft. So it's that attitude. So not by compulsion, but by the Spirit. Create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a right spirit within me. Renew your free spirit within me. Enlarge my heart so I can obey your commandments. That's what the new covenant is about. Now let's go to chapter 3. Because we have a few points to cover in chapter 3. So let's read verses 1 through 8. What advantage, Romans chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, what advantage then has the Yehudim? Or what is the profit of circumcision? Much in every way. Much in every way. Let's see. Hold on a second, brethren. Trying to adjust one of my screens. Okay, yes. So let's see. Much in every way, chiefly because to them were committed the oracles of Elohim. So we have a definition of what's meant by circumcision in context here, because it says to them, not the surgery. So we could understand when Paul is saying the circumcision, sometimes he's talking about the surgery, sometimes he's talking about the system of faith or the people. In this case, he's talking about the people, chiefly because to them were committed the oracles of Elohim, the prophecies, the teachings. For what if some did not believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of Elohim without effect? Wow, what a question. The answer is certainly not. Indeed, let Elohim be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that you may be justified in your words and may overcome when you are judged. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of Elohim, what shall we say? Is Elohim unjust who inflicts wrath? I speak as a man. In other words, he's asking a foolish question that really shouldn't be asked. That's kind of what I speak as a man, as a mere mortal. Certainly not. For then how will Elohim judge the world? Okay. For if the truth of Elohim has increased through my lie to his glory, why am I also still judged as a sinner? And why not say, oh, let us all do evil that good may come? As we are slanderously reported, and as some affirm that we say, their condemnation is just. The attitude of Paul here, in justly assessing these perspectives. So let's go back. So what advantage then is there in being a Jew? And we're speaking in context of the Yehudim that are in the scriptures here, not necessarily people who call themselves Yehudim today. I want to make that distinction. I'm not here to judge who is a Yehudim today and who's not. I'm not going into that, but this is speaking about Yehudim who lived in the time of Paul and before. That's what's being addressed here. He's talking about those who are truly Yehudim, at least in the flesh. So what advantage then has the Yehudim? Or see, he's very clear. Or what is the profit of circumcision? And so the Yehudim being the them, and the circumcision being the actual surgery of becoming of a proselyte, becoming circumcised, or even as Joshua and Caleb had the new generation circumcised. What is the profit of such things? It's not a little. He says very much. So keep that in mind as we think about Paul's understanding of Torah and his perspective. It is very much. It's not a useless thing. It's not okay. Yeah, it's all right. No, it is very much in these days where he was alive. Because why? Because to them were committed the oracles of Elohim. This is something that all, especially when you read the books of Clement, you read the book of Irenaeus, you read the books of even Tertullian, makes reference to that. How, because the Yehudim had the Torah, bringing them the good news was relatively much easier to do than the Gentiles. If you notice in the book of Acts, as we were reading, it was thousands upon thousands of Yehudim, and even many Kohanim, many priests came to believe, right? Among the Gentiles, there were believers. In every land, that they're different among others, there were believers, some many, sometimes not so many, but there were believers. But the multitude of believers among the Yehudim had to do, because we're dealing in many more lands than just one land. Out of the land of Israel, there were many thousands. Out of the Gentile lands, there were relatively few in comparison to what occurred in that one land of Israel. There were thousands upon the thousands in the Gentile lands. There were many, but not if you would take them individually, not necessarily as quickly or as many as came to faith in Israel. Because Israel, what? They had the oracles. They did not need to be told there was an Elohim. Maybe they needed to be reminded of the characteristics and promises of Elohim, but they did not have to be turned and told, these idols are not the deity. Stop worshiping idols. They didn't have to deal that. They did not have the pressure. Well, if you don't worship our idols, you will be ostracized or even killed, because that's what some of the Gentiles face. Because depending on what type of society they lived in, it's a good thing by Elohim's mercy. The Romans early on did not require such thing. Did not interfere with the faiths, whatever a person believed, as long as they kept the peace is all they were, because that's what they were put there to do as Elohim saw fit, to keep the peace in the world. But the Jews did not have that issue. There were lots of sects, unfortunately, different groups, different factions, different beliefs, but they all believed in Elohim. They all believed in the same scriptures, although because they were seeking their own, they had their own ideas. They imposed their own ideas on what the scriptures meant. And this is why you had all these different rabbis and all these different disciples to this rabbi, that rabbi, this other rabbi, and they're not really united in that way as they should be. Because they had all these different rabbis. And unfortunately, the faith in Messiah has become the same thing today. The body of Messiah has come, it's all these segments. And Elohim says, no, there's one rabbi. He is that one rabbi. So going back to this, yes, there is lots of benefit of the Yehudim, because chiefly, as he says, because to them were committed the scriptures, the oracles, the prophecies. But verse 4, what if some did not believe? Will their unbelief make the faithfulness of Elohim without effect? Not at all. Certainly not. Let Elohim be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that you may be justified in your words and may overcome when you are judged. That you may be justified in your words, and and may overcome when you are judged. Let every man be a liar. Don't be wise let's not be wise in our own understanding. Let's not judge the scriptures, but let's rest on the mercies of Elohim, as you will see as we look through this chapter and as we look through some texts in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, to validate what Paul is saying here. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of Elohim, so what shall we say? Is Elohim unjust who inflicts wrath? I speak as a man. Certainly not. For then how will Elohim judge the world? For in him saying, if you commit this, you will die, in so doing, he has actually given them access to everlasting life through Messiah, who would come way into the future, as David will see, as you will see. So, as I've mentioned many times, the people in the Old Testament, as long as they did not cut themselves off, where they did not sin to a degree high-handedly, that they were cut off from being the people of their punishment was their chastisement in the flesh. It doesn't mean they were condemned to everlasting life. Not at all. That was their punishment, but they were still his people. And in the resurrection, shall these dry bones rise? Yes, they will. Because all these dead bones were such because they were punished for their sins. Remember that. They were not buried. That's what that whole point meant. But yet he will have mercy and they will rise. Through whom? Through Messiah. Through the law? No, we will see that. The law does not allow for that. But something else does, and we will see it. But if so certainly not. For then how will Elohim judge the world? He will judge the world. He will inflict just punishment. Some will receive more, some will receive less punishment, according to what they deserve. Some will, unfortunately, receive, those who are wicked, who refuse, will suffer irreversible punishment. Right? So that's how he will judge. How will he judge? Verse 7, for if the truth of Elohim has increased through my lie to his glory, why am I also still judged? Now, this is not the mind. These are not the thoughts of those who have the oracles of Elohim, the circumcision. These are the thoughts of the Gentiles. Well, it says, since my sin brings glory to Elohim, might as well stay sinning, through their own philosophies and things of that nature, they come up with these ideas, and that there's no need for piety and so on. If you listen to the Clementine Acts, I think book 8 covers a lot about that. Book 7 and 8 covers a lot about how they thought. And verse 8, why am I also still judged as a sinner? Why are you still judged as a sinner? Believe it or not, is so that Elohim can have mercy on the sinner. You will see why, so we could have mercy on the sinner. And why not say, let us do evil that good may come, as we are slanderously reported, as some affirm that we say. Some falsely accuse the believers of this type of idea, that let's do evil so good may come. These were rumors spreading around as false understanding of what the called ones, what the disciples of Messiah were teaching. And of course, these were being circulated by false people that were against the ways of Elohim. As we are slanderously reported, see, slander, as some affirm that we say, and their condemnation is just. Stop. We need to be just judges. When people do things maliciously, we have to have this understanding. Their condemnation is just. Sometimes some people could be I wouldn't say merciful. Some people are licentious in behavior. Some people are licentious in thought. In other words, they condone what Elohim would not condone. We must not condone what Elohim will not condone. We will not try to forgive what Elohim will not forgive. As John says somewhere, pray for those who have sinned. I'm paraphrasing, but I do not say to pray for those who sin unto death. There are certain sins a person does, their condemnation is just. And so we have to be very careful before we try to pray for people, that we understand the situation. because it says we shall pray with faith. We shall pray with the understanding also in everything, but even the conditions of what we're being called to pray for, because the adversary could use these situations to destroy our faith. When we find ourselves praying about judgments and that Elohim has taken, and because we've not taken the time to investigate the situation, we're praying and crying out and having others join us in prayer for a situation that Elohim has judged and will not reverse. It's very important, because many times, Brendan, I'm telling you, that's what many of us do, including myself. We do not investigate the cause that we're praying. Oh, could you pray for such and such, sister? Pray for such. We have to be careful as the congregation of Elohim. We're not a denomination. The body of Messiah cannot function as Protestants and we can't. We have to be. Prayer is the most intimate thing you can do concerning Elohim. You're coming with him. You have to come. We have to come to him in spirit and truth. We have to know what we're talking about. And we saw hints of that when we were doing the book of Acts. Remember Dorcas, the seller, one of them, she had died. And when they asked Paul to Peter to pray, they didn't just come and say, oh, Peter, pray for this. They came and said she had good work. She did this. They present all the good work she did for the body. And so they were confirming her, you could say, being a child of Elohim truly, and that she's worthy of this prayer request. And when Peter saw that, he went and prayed for her, and she rose from the dead. So we have to be very careful of our prayer. Otherwise, the adversary will frustrate us when we say we've prayed for this and prayed for that, and the person keeps dying or nothing happens. Many times because we're praying against the judgments of Elohim. We have to know why certain things are before we pray. When we don't know, we don't know. But we have to do our due diligence before we come before the throne of mercy. If we're going to go to court, forbid, we know the courts, and not we, but you know how the court system works here. Before you appear in court, you have all your documents and all your reasonings there. How much more so before Elohim? Let's take our prayer seriously, and you will see Elohim will take us more seriously in prayer. So their condemnation is just who have this mindset here, slander, talking about things that are not true, falsely accusing, coming to conclusions without having all the information. Because where it's written, do not speak until you know all the facts. This has troubled the body of Messiah to such an extent. People coming with all these things because they're not assessing information properly. So their condemnation is just. Let's continue. Verse 9. Then what then are we better than they? Are we better? Meaning those who are not of the circumcision, are we better? What's the answer? Not at all. Not at all. Okay, that's the answer. Gentiles are not better than the Yehudim. And I'm talking about the Yehudim of Scripture. I'm not talking about people today in this generation. I'm not addressing that at all. I'm speaking strictly about what's in the Scriptures here. Are we better than they? Not at all. For we have previously charged both Yehudim and Greeks that they are all under sin. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? In the world system, that would be a bad thing because people are judgmental and merciless. But we'll see, not Elohim. That they are all under sin. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none after Elohim. They have all gone out of the way. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. Their tongues, they have practiced deceit. With their tongues, they have practiced deceit. Verse 13. The poison of apes is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways. The way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of Elohim before their eyes. So much, right? The assessment of mankind through Elohim. But in all of this, it's for mercy, as you will see. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law. that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before Elohim. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. How perfectly true that is, especially when you read the Old Testament, you see that repeated over and over. These are principles, solid foundational understanding of things. Now, before I go to verse 1, let me do verse 19 so I don't forget. It says, now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law. So many people argue, when Paul says somewhere, I think in Galatians elsewhere, we're not under the law. They don't even under there. And this is why it's not good for there to be so many teachers. So oftentimes there are people, they're not even baptized and they're teaching about things about the law they don't understand. On both sides, you have people who believe in keeping the commandments, which is true, but then when they see this, who are under the law, and Paul says you're not under law, they're troubled. Why they're troubled? Because they don't understand the statement. Being under the law does not mean you are a seeker, one who's trying to obey the law. And that's how many people understand the term being under the law, that, I'm under the law. So it means I'm trying to obey this. Just the opposite. Those who are under the law are those who are disobedient to the law. That's the actual meaning of under the law. It doesn't mean like it's an umbrella for you and you're trying. No. The law requires that you are in the law, that you walk in the law. Minimal. You're not under it. That's what that means. Okay? And you will, so those who are under it says those, whatever the law says, it says to those who are under it, those who are doing less, in other words. That's what it means. But we know Messiah has not only required us to do what's in the law, he requires us to excel what's in the law. Not only don't we steal, we do good, we give. It's more than, so not only do we keep Sabbath, but we do good every day. And this is, another study where people pervert that understanding to mean, we don't need to keep. No, it doesn't mean, it's not about you don't need to. It means we do more than just keep the Sabbath. We don't just keep a day that's idle. On the Sabbath, we spend it praising, reading the scriptures, fellowshipping with Elohim, resting in him, and with a heart that desires it. We're not looking at the clock. When will the sun set? There are many who keep Sabbath like that. Many. When will the sun set? I have this other thing. This type of Sabbath keeping is vain and unacceptable to Elohim. It must be a Sabbath keeping with all the heart, all the soul. So in the times when this was being written, and if you read the accounts in Josephus about how Sabbath was kept, it wasn't kept in a very acceptable way. Many of them were just handling civil matters in the synagogues. The priests were not doing really what they necessarily should be doing, which is officiating worship services. You could check it in Josephus. They walk around really being idle. They didn't do anything. And there was not even much evidence of any worship. Look it up. That's what in the first century, that's what it became. And that's why you see some of the things that are said, even my first century bishops, that we should not keep the Sabbath as the Yehudim, who are just idle. But people twist their teachings to mean, we should not keep the Sabbath as the Yehudim who are resting. That's not what it says. It says not to keep it, not the way they do, being idle, doing nothing, just waiting for the sun to set. Don't observe it like that, is what and they're very good. You used to keep the Sabbath to fellowship and to worship. That's what the ancient elders taught. Apart from what we have in the New Testament. And I say up to the second century, then those teachings became perverted, whereas if they're isolating what Irenaeus or Tertullian might say to mean, we don't need to keep the Sabbath at all, which was the terrible thing. And they do the same thing as you see with the scriptures. But therefore, so being under the law means, when Paul is talking about you're not under the law, he's saying as believers, sin shall not dwell in us, as he says clearly, where he says, you are not under law, therefore sin shall not dwell in you. If you're not, because you're not under the law. But if you are under the law, it means the law is accusing you. Why are you stealing? Because you're a thief, you're an adulterer. Look, that's what it means. The law says, hey, you, stop stealing, stop killing, stop this. But if you're not killing, you're not under the law. You're in the law at minimal, and as you grow in grace, you will be excelling in how you obey. So let's go back to verse 9. So we understand. He says the Gentiles are not better than the Jews, not at all. And he shows the characteristics of all people from verses 10 as it is written to verse 18, right? There is no fear of Elohim before their eyes. There is, and verse 11 says, verse 10 says, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is no fear of Elohim before their eyes. Even the obedient, believe it or not, because the obedient are only drawn to Elohim by what? His mercy. Remember Isaiah? Why was Isaiah, was Isaiah righteous? No, Elohim called him, because Elohim knew he had the mind to understand that he would be willing. But had not Elohim called him, he would have continued his way. Had not Elohim called Gideon, Gideon would have continued his way. Had not Elohim called Moses, Moses would have continued in his way. So even had not he called and had mercy on Abraham, Abraham would have continued in his way. Where is the grace of and where's the mercy of Elohim in the very much there? Where is the salvation of Elohim apart from the Torah? Very much there. Because had he not himself in mercy reached out to any of the righteous, none of them would have turned. None of them would have understood. None of them would have turned from their sins. None of them would have the fear of Elohim. They would have all abandoned whatever they had. But in mercy, apart from the law, Elohim calls them. Then what he does, he gives them the law according to their needs. Let's move on. So verse 20, so therefore by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. Again, what is he talking about there? Don't kill, don't steal, just as we read in the 10 commandments. And as one of our friends, our brethren, Brother Bob Korn would say, no sin, no sin, it was interesting how he described how it's written in the you no adultery, no this, no that, no this, no this. It doesn't exist for you is basically what it's saying in the, it should not exist for you. Anyway, let's try to move on a little bit. What else? So all have sinned according to verse 9 to 2:20, and apart from Elohim, all are under the law, because were it not for his mercy, none would turn to obedience. So therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight. Verse 21 to 26. So, but now the righteousness of Elohim apart from the law, as I was saying, is revealed. Now it is revealed. It was by inference shown. That's what he's saying. So all have sinned. But now he's saying, now the righteousness of Elohim. Remember the question? Let me see, what does it says here? Verse 3, will their unbelief make the faithfulness of Elohim without effect? Verse 5, but if our righteousness demonstrate the righteousness of Elohim, what shall we say? Is Elohim unjust who inflicts wrath? Right? So the answer is here. But now the righteousness of Elohim, how is he righteous in all of this? But now the righteousness of Elohim apart from the law is revealed. Do you see how what Paul is saying? He's not saying the law is bad. He's not saying the law is not needed. He's just showing you how it's by the mercy of Elohim he intervenes in the lives of people. The righteousness of Elohim is revealed apart from the law, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. It was being witnessed. It was demonstrated, was shown throughout the lives. If you pay close attention, you will see Elohim's mercy reaching out to people apart from the law, apart from any righteous obedience on their part, especially Gideon. When you read Gideon, it shows it. But he was witnessed by the law and prophets. He's not speaking without precedence. There's a reason, verifiable reason he's saying this. Even the righteousness of Elohim, which is through faith in Yeshua Messiah, to all and on all who believe, for there is no difference. On all, Jew or Gentile. The Jews have sinned and they suffered a lot. But he has mercy upon them through Messiah. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of Elohim. All have sinned. But through Messiah, the Yehudim and the Gentile find forgiveness. Being justified freely by his giving, by his grace, through the redemption that is in Messiah, Yeshua. Messiah's sacrifice is effectual at the time. It was effective retro, going all the way back to Adam. It was effectual going to the last generation until the judgment day. It's effectual, doesn't stop. It's a wonderful thing. Verse 25, whom Elohim set forth to be propitiation by his blood through faith, to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance Elohim had passed over the sins that were previously committed. To what? To demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Yeshua. What is it saying? According to the testimony in the law and prophets previously, the ones previously. Again, because in his forbearance Elohim had passed over the sins that were previously committed. Previously, all those sins, he had mercy to demonstrate at the present time, at the present meaning this first century, whatever time it was, at the present time, that the time that Messiah came, the time that Paul is alive, at the present time, his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in salvation, in Elohim's salvation, in Yeshua. Let's do a little bit of the Tanakh, a little bit. And I would ask some volunteers or the host if to help with reading a few things. The first one will be 2 Samuel chapter 1 through 7. If the host can help me, and as the host is helping, if we can have a volunteer to read from verses 8 to verses 11. I would ask Brother Thompson if you could help with that.
Second Samuel
chapter 7, verses 1 through 7, Brother Felix. And Brother Thompson, if you could read after Felix, and I'll tell you when to start, because I'll make some observations as we read this. And but read quickly, okay? Don't read as quickly as you can as you read. So Brother Felix is going to read 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. Brother Thompson, 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 9 to 11. And then I'll ask for a volunteer to read verses 12 to 16. Very, very important for us to understand this, what Paul is saying. Go ahead, brother. Nice and loud, okay?
All right. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 1 to 7. And it came to pass, when the king sat in his house, and the Eternal had given him rest around about from all his enemies, that the king said unto Nathan the prophet, See, now I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of Elohim dwells with curtains. And Nathan said to the king, Go, do all that is in your heart, for the Eternal is with you. And it came to pass that night that the word of the Eternal came unto Nathan, saying, Go and tell my servant David, Thus saith the Eternal, Shall you build me a house for me to dwell in? Whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle, in all the places wherein I have walked with all the children of Israel, Speak. I've spoken.
Hold on, bro. Mute your someone, please.
Someone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, verse 7. In all the places wherein I have walked with all the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribe of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people Israel, saying, why build you not me a house of cedar?
Thank you, brother. Quick view. So David looking and in his house of how comfortable he is, and not fully understanding the nature of Elohim. He sees, see, now I dwell in the house of cedar, but the ark of Elohim dwells inside a tent. And that's a good attitude to have. Even though, see, he's putting he says Elohim should not have less than I have, less honor than I have. That's his attitude. It's a good, and we must make sure we have at least that type of attitude. We should not seek our own glory, our own satisfaction, seek after our own things, while Elohim's, concern is in disarray. We should elevate Elohim above ourselves. And Messiah told us, unless our righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, we will no wise answer. And then he says, we must love Elohim more so than anything, more than parents, more than family. New covenant, understand, we must. Then Nathan, knowing the law, knowing these things, he said, go ahead, do all that's in your heart. See, he made a judgment, and his judgment was righteous, was reasonable. But it happened that night that the word, the davar, that the logos of Elohim came to, no, Nathan, you're right judgment, but no, this is what I want to happen. Go tell my servant X, Y, and Z, as it says in verse 5. I've never asked, why have you not built me a house of cedar? So quick thing, see, Nathan was a prophet, he was knowledgeable, and he responded justly according to that knowledge. But Elohim intervened and said, not this time, Nathan, this is what you will tell my servant David. So that's why, again, how last Sabbath, I forgot when, recently I talked about the law. We must be careful how we approach the scriptures. We don't tie ourselves in that way. We must be the scriptures are intended for people who are spiritually discerned. Who are spiritual? Those who have repented of sins, baptized, and believe in the good news and are baptized. They are spiritually discerned. You can see a scholar could read this and probably knows the Bible. I'm assuming, let's assume by heart, and they don't understand it. And a person who could barely remember one word can read the scripture, because that person is a child of the Spirit of God, guides that person to understand exactly what the scripture says when the scholar cannot. That's why it's not a matter of scholars, as the scripture, not too many wise are called, the wise of this world, of course, not too many. And yet, who's guiding so many of what we see? The so-called wise, the so-called scholars. That's not where it lies. It's by the Spirit of Elohim. And a scholar is blessed who has the Spirit of Elohim, but unfortunately, many don't. They just create more and more confusion, relying on their own understanding, and too often assumptions and theories and ideas. And in the faith of Messiah, there's no room for that. It's either we know or we don't know. That's it. And that's how it's always in spirit and in truth. And when it's time for us to know, Elohim will cause us. But back to this. So he told Nathan, tell Nathan such and such, right? So I said verse for Brother Thompson to read verses 9 to 11. I'm sorry, verses, I'm going to ask whoever has it.
Yeah, there is a sound, I guess, from you, Brother Thompson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brother Thompson, for whatever reason, you're not coming through. It's coming through as a
An
sound,
alarm.
as an alarm, almost. So, want to try again? Let's stop recording for.
Okay, so the same chapter.
Yes.
Okay, so 9 to 11.
Nice and quick, okay?
Yeah, and I was with you wherever you went, and have cut off all your enemies out of your sight, and have made you a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they will dwell in a place in their own, and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. And as since the time that I have commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies, also the Eternal tells you that he will make you a house.
Thank you, brother. So let's take a quick look at this. You're probably saying, what's the point? You will see the point, hopefully. So he's telling the prophet Nathan what to tell David, and he says to them, um, and I have been with you wherever you, verse 9, wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and have made you a great name, like the name of the great men who are. Notice he has. So at this stage, as he's speaking to David, it's something that has happened. He has given him rest. And even says here in verse 1, now it came to pass when the king was dwelling in his house, and the Eternal had given him rest from all his enemies around. So they're dwelling safely in the days of David. That is the time that since Moses, 400 years later, Elohim finally gave them that rest through David, right? Keep that in mind. So they have that rest. And as we read here, let's see where we were. Yeah. Verse 9 says, I have cut off all your enemies from before you, and have made you a great name, like the name of the great men who are on the earth. Notice, like the name of the great men who are on the earth. Keep that in mind. Who is he talking? He's about the other nations. Elohim has made many other nations great. Israel was not great until that time. Elohim made them great, but Elohim had made among the nations. Many of them are great, and there's a reason. So, and since that time I commanded judges to be over my people, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies. Also, the Eternal tells you, I will make you a house, it says in verse 11, right? So I will make you a house. David wanted, in his goodness, in his sensibility, said, I'm living in this beautiful cedar house, and my Elohim is just living in a tent. Let me make him a house of cedar. But Elohim explains all of this. Guess what, David? I'm going to make you a house. He's going to build David for a house. And the prophecies in Isaiah chapter 4 and other books talks about this future house. And it's not the one a lot of people think, but look at it yourself. So verse 12 to the end, I'll read this portion, right? So when your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you. Notice, when your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. Elohim knows all things. He knows David's going to sin, do all these terrible things, yet he already gives him his future. You will rest with your fathers. You will not be cut off, it says, and I will establish his kingdom. Your seed, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. This is the part you have to pay close attention to. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chastise him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. This is what we see with the nations. Whenever they sin, Elohim would send judgments. And this is specifically for who? Not all Israel, but the descendants of David. This is a covenant with David, not a covenant with all Israel. Keep that in mind. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. I said up to verse 16, and your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. Notice, but my mercy shall not depart from, as I took it from Saul, he says. Okay, so and verse, your throne shall be established. And according to all these words, and according to all this vision, so Nathan spoke with David. Okay, that's what we call verse 16. Let me just see something here. David's thanksgiving. Let me see something so I could tell you. Verse 19 says, and yet, and this is, let me go to verse 18 of 2 Samuel 7. Then King David went in and sat before the Eternal. And he said, who am I, oh sovereign Elohim? Actually, who am I, oh sovereign Yehweh? It's the name that's theirs. Adon or Adonai Yud. And what is my house that you have brought me this far? He's humble in his thinking. He's humble. He's gentle. He's asked why. And he's sitting before Elohim. We need to sit before Elohim. We need to have this fellowship with Elohim. And yet, verse 19, and yet this was a small thing in your sight, O sovereign Yud-Heh-Vav, and you have also spoken of your servant's house, and you have also spoken also of your servant's house for a great while to come. Is this the manner of man, O sovereign Elohim? I never even realized he asked this question. But notice, this prophecy, David understands, is for a great while to come. His son is not a great, having a son is not he said a great while. He didn't say a little while. So he understood this is something way into the future, or way into his future, not our future. Way into his, for you have also, he said, see, he says in verse 18, and what is my house that you have brought me this far, that you've doing all of this for me? And he said, this was just, and still you've done all this, means Dianu, this has been, it would have been enough, but this would have been a small thing, but you also speak of your servant's house for a great while to come. He wouldn't use a great while, just thinking of, his future son. So he's talking about great while to come. Okay. So what is all this about? This is going to be about the mercies of David, brethren. This is about how Elohim has mercy on people apart from the law. Remember what he says in verse 16. And your house, verse 14. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chastise him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Do you see the difference? This is the mercy of David being enacted in the new covenant. A few other verses in I won't read them for lack of, in 2 Samuel 24, verse 14, write this down. You could see David's pleading, begging, asking for this mercy. 2 Samuel verse 24, verse 14, and I'm going to read this for you, but I'm going to ask if someone could read 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 42. I want somebody to read for me Isaiah 55, verse 3, and Acts 13, verse 34. Please help me get this message through by reading these for me one by one when I tell you. So 2 Samuel 24, verse 14. Let me turn to that. 24. 2 Samuel 24, we'll see David understanding this. And David said to God, I am in great distress. Please let us fall into the hand of the Eternal, for his mercies are great, but do not let me fall into the hand of men. He had committed this great crime, whatever crime it was. And for the context, not going to go into that, which deserve what? Death, according to the law. But he's asking for the mercies. Why? Because before, Elohim had said he would have mercy upon him in that way. Please let us fall into the hand of the eternal, for his mercies are great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man. Can somebody read for me 2 Chronicles 6, verse 42? Quickly.
Oh,
6 verse.
Elohim, do
Yeah,
not
go ahead,
turn
sister.
away.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sister. Sorry.
Oh, Elohim, do not turn away the face of your anointed. Remember the loving commitment of your servant David.
Amen. So remember, and again, the mercies of David. Could you read a little bit more? Verse 43.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I don't have verse 43. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. It's okay. So we'll move it. And also Isaiah 55, verse 3. Can somebody read that for me? We're coming to a close. Isaiah 55, verse 3.
Trying to get to it, brother. If anybody got it, quickly read it. 55, verse 3.
Yes.
Okay, 55, verse 3, Isaiah. Incline your ear and come unto me. Hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David.
See again, the sure mercies of David. And I will read for you Acts 13. Thank you, brother. So the sure mercies, the mercy is what we read in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Now let's see what Acts 13 says. And we'll move on back to Romans to conclude for today. I know it's a bit long. So Acts 13, verse 34. What does it say? Let me turn there. Acts 13, verse 34 says, let's go to Acts 13, verse 32. And we declare to you glad tidings, good news, that promise which was made to the Father. Which promise? All the way from Adam through David, as prophesied in Isaiah 55, as the brother just read, is we declare the good news, that promise which was made to the fathers. Elohim has fulfilled this for us, their children, in that he has raised up Yeshua, as it is written also in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. There was Solomon. Yes, he was the son. And Solomon sinned, and Elohim did not cut him off. He had mercy upon him, right? But there was this son after the order of Melchizedek who did not sin. But that mercy still applied, but in greater way. And in him, it says, and that he raised him from the dead. No more to return to corruption. He has spoken thus, I will give you the sure mercies of David. There he also says in another psalm, you will not allow your Holy One to see corruption. And he goes on, but the sure mercies of David. This is how we have forgiveness of sins apart from the law. When Paul in Romans chapter 3 says, but now the righteousness of Elohim apart from the law is revealed, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. That's what he's talking about. The law does not allow for forgiveness of sins if you commit, it doesn't. If you committed adultery, you would be killed. If you blasphemed, you would be killed. If you broke the Sabbath, you would be killed. It's the law. And if someone prior to David would turn a person away from that judgment, that person would be sinning in the sight of Elohim, because he had given them that bit and bridle, because that's how. Why? Because all throughout the generations of the biblical Israel, he said they were a stiff-necked people. They were a people who sinned above the other nations. more so, because, that's what the scripture says. But in David, he made the promise. He gave that covenant with David, specifically with David and his line. But when the righteous one came, that was the son of David through Miriam, the one who is the righteous one. In him, Messiah, in him being Messiah, Elohim gave that mercy to all apart from the law. I hope you understand. That's what Paul is talking about. It's not something Paul is making up. That's why he says it is witnessed by the law and the prophets. And I've said before, he called Noah. Noah wouldn't have known what to do had he not called Noah. It was of no personal righteousness he deserved. Elohim had mercy and called him. His same thing for Abraham, for Isaac, for Jacob, and so many, David, so many. He intervened in their lives in mercy and grace, just as the Spirit today, he has poured his Spirit upon all flesh, as we will be celebrating 50 days. After 49, after the seventh Sabbath, we will be celebrating Pentecost. On Yom HaBikurim, at his resurrection in the evening, we didn't cover that, but when he appeared to his disciples, he gave them the Holy Spirit. He didn't give them the Holy Spirit 50 days later. He gave them the Spirit on the first day of first fruits. He says, receive ye the Holy Spirit. And he breathed on them according to John, and they received the Spirit. But 50 days later, 7 Sabbaths plus one more day, the power of that Spirit that he gave them manifests to all, to be a witness. And many who were of Israel, thousands upon thousands, kept believing since then. And even today, whether a person is Jew or Gentile, whoever believes are saved. So it says to end here with verse, let's see what time it is. Ooh, it's very late. It says, verse 25 to end. For whom Elohim set forth to be verse 24, of Romans chapter 3, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Messiah Yeshua, just as he freely justified David according to his covenant with him. When you sin, I will chastise you with the blows of men, but I will not remove his mercy. He will not cut them off. So verse 25, whom Elohim set forth to be a propitiation by his blood, by his life. That's what that means. Through faith, to demonstrate his righteousness. Remember, is Elohim righteous? Yes, he is. He has counted all under sin so he can have mercy on all, because in his forbearance, Elohim has passed over the sins. We just celebrated the Passover. He has passed over the sins that were previously committed. During the days of the Passover, in the days of Egypt, there were many unbelievers in Egypt, but whoever put the blood on their doorposts, there were many who were idolaters. It's not because they were righteous they passed over. No, Elohim gave them the Passover, and he spared them, all of them. He spared them. Were they righteous? Obviously not. Look at their behavior afterwards. You can see they were not righteous. They had idolatry in their hearts. Elohim knew that. He had mercy upon them. Apart from the law, they did not even receive the law yet. So because of his forbearance, Elohim had passed over the sins that were previously committed to demonstrate at the present time, his time, the time of the Apostle Paul, his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith, who has right understanding that leads to trust in Yeshua, brethren. Isn't that good news? Which one of us can stand in our own righteousness? Isn't that good news? It's good news for me. Thank you, Father. Thank you for listening. I know this has been a long study. Thank you, brethren, for listening.